My mother-in-law canceled Christmas for my daughter so her favorite grandchild wouldn't feel jealous. She took away the gifts. She took away the joy and told my crying child to understand her place. That was the night I stopped protecting her feelings and started protecting my daughter. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Cedar Ridge was the kind of town where people waved even if they didn't like you. White picket fences lined streets, named after trees that had been cut down decades ago. The houses looked the same because nobody wanted to stand out. Dorothy Knox understood that instinct. She'd spent years learning to blend in, to soften her edges, to smile when she wanted to scream. Christmas Eve arrived with freezing rain that turned to sleet by afternoon. Dorothy stood at the kitchen window watching ice coat the branches of the oak tree in their backyard. Behind her, the oven timer beeped. Sugar cookies. She'd made them from scratch because Michael's mother expected homemade everything. The house smelled like vanilla and cinnamon. Dorothy had scrubbed the kitchen until the counters gleamed. She'd vacuumed twice. The Christmas tree stood in the corner of the living room, decorated exactly the way Gloria Knox preferred. White lights, red and gold ornaments, no tinsel because Gloria thought tinsel looked cheap. Dorothy pulled the cookies from the oven and set them on the cooling rack. Her hands were steady. They were always steady now. She'd trained herself not to shake, not to show weakness, not to let anyone see how much effort it took to maintain the careful performance of being Michael Knox's wife. In the living room, Maddie sat cross-legged on the carpet with safety scissors and a stack of printer paper. She was 6 years old with uneven bangs that Dorothy had trimmed the week before. Maddie had insisted on cutting them herself first, resulting in a jagged line across her forehead that Dorothy had done her best to fix. The bangs made Maddie look younger, vulnerable in a way that twisted something in Dorothy's chest. Maddie hummed under her breath while she worked. It was a nervous habit, one she'd developed over the past year. Dorothy recognized it because she'd developed her own nervous habits, biting the inside of her cheek, counting to 10 before responding to anything Michael said, breathing through her nose when Gloria walked into a room. "Daddy says Grandma is bringing extra gifts," Maddie said without looking up from her snowflake. Dorothy's hands stilled on the cookie sheet. "Did he?" "Uh-huh," he said. "She went shopping special." Dorothy forced her expression into something that might pass for a smile. She already knew what that meant. Gloria Knox didn't do anything without a purpose, and her purposes rarely aligned with kindness. The garage door opened and closed. Michael Knox was out there pretending to organize tools. He always disappeared before his mother arrived. Dorothy used to think it was because he was busy, that he was trying to make sure everything was perfect for Gloria's visit. She'd stopped believing that months ago. Now she understood he was hiding, avoiding, waiting for Gloria to arrive so he could slip in after the initial tension had passed. Dorothy wiped her hands on a dish towel and walked back to the kitchen. Through the window over the sink, she could see Michael's shadow moving in the garage. He was reorganizing the same shelf he'd organized last week. Stalling. The clock on the microwave read 4:30. Gloria would arrive at 5. She was always punctual, treating tardiness as a moral failing. Dorothy had 15 minutes to finish the cookies, change into something Gloria wouldn't criticize, and brace herself for whatever fresh humiliation the evening would bring. She changed into a dark green sweater and black pants. Conservative, modest, nothing Gloria could comment on. Dorothy caught her reflection in the bedroom mirror and barely recognized herself. When had she become this person? When had she started dressing for someone else's approval? The doorbell rang at exactly 5 o'clock. Dorothy opened the door and Gloria Knox swept inside without waiting for an invitation. She wore a long wool coat, navy blue, expensive. Her hair was styled perfectly, gray streaked through brown, cut in a severe bob that framed her angular face. She carried 2 shopping bags in each hand. "Cold out there," Gloria said, though it wasn't really a greeting. It was an observation, clinical and detached. "Let me take your coat," Dorothy offered. "I won't be staying long." Gloria never took off her coat. She never had. It was her way of showing she wasn't planning to settle in, even when she stayed for hours, even when she took over the kitchen, even when she rearranged the presents under the tree because she didn't like how Dorothy had organized them. Gloria scanned the living room with the precision of an inspector searching for violations. Her gaze moved over the tree, the decorations, the presents Dorothy had carefully wrapped. Her lips pressed together in a thin line. Maddie looked up from her snowflakes. "Hi, Grandma." "Hello, Madison." Gloria never used Maddie's nickname. She said nicknames bred informality, and informality bred disrespect. "Michael." Gloria called toward the garage. Not loud, but commanding. The garage door opened, and Michael appeared, wiping his hands on his jeans, though they weren't dirty. He was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who looked like he should be confident. But around his mother, he shrank. Dorothy had watched it happen so many times she'd lost count. "Hey, Mom." He crossed the room and kissed Gloria's cheek. "The presents need reorganizing," Gloria said. "Some of them should come with me." Dorothy felt her stomach tighten. "Which ones?" Gloria didn't look at her. She addressed Michael. "The ones for Madison. They'll be better at my house." "Better for what?" Dorothy kept her voice level. "My other grandson gets overwhelmed when there's too much focus on one child. You know that. I've explained it before." Gloria set her shopping bags down with careful precision, each one positioned exactly where she wanted it. Dorothy turned to Michael. He was looking at the floor. "You knew about this?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Mom mentioned it might be easier." "Easier for who?" "Dorothy." Michael's voice carried a warning. "Not now. Not in front of my mother." The same warning she'd heard 100 times before. Gloria crouched down next to the tree and began sorting through the presents. She picked up 3 boxes wrapped in red paper with white ribbons. The ones Dorothy had spent an hour wrapping while Maddie napped. The ones with Maddie's name written in careful script on the tags. "These will come home with me," Gloria said. "Madison can open them when we visit after Christmas." Maddie stopped cutting her snowflake. The scissors went still in her small hand. "But those are mine." "Yes, dear, and you'll get them. Just not tonight." "But it's Christmas Eve." Gloria's expression didn't soften. "Christmas isn't about getting everything you want the moment you want it. You already had your birthday 3 weeks ago. Some children don't get birthdays at all." Dorothy watched her daughter's face crumple. Maddie's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. She'd learned not to cry in front of Gloria. She'd learned it made things worse. "Maddie, honey, go to your room for a minute," Dorothy said quietly. Maddie stood up, gathering her paper snowflakes against her chest like armor. She walked down the hallway with small, measured steps. The bedroom door closed with a soft click. Dorothy turned to Gloria. "Put the gifts back." Gloria stood, holding the 3 wrapped boxes. "Excuse me." "Put them back under the tree." "I'm trying to teach Madison about fairness, about thinking of others. These are lessons you should be teaching her." Dorothy felt something harden in her chest. It was the same feeling she'd had when the doctor told her she'd miscarried 2 years ago. When Michael had said maybe it's for the best because his mother had been visiting that week and grief would have been inconvenient. The same feeling she'd swallowed down, pushed away, ignored because keeping the peace was more important than her pain. She was tired of that feeling. "She's not your child," Dorothy said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a blade. Gloria's expression turned cold. "Don't tell me how to raise children." "I'm not. I'm telling you how to treat my daughter." Michael stepped between them. "Can you stop starting fights for once?" The words hit Dorothy like a slap. Not the first slap, just the latest in a series that had been building for years. She looked at her husband and saw what she'd been refusing to see. He wasn't caught between them. He'd already chosen. "Your mother just told our daughter she's had enough birthdays," Dorothy said. "She's taking her Christmas presents and telling her to be grateful for what she gets. And you're defending her. Mom's just trying to keep things fair for everyone." "Fair." Dorothy laughed once, sharp and bitter. "Right." Gloria picked up her shopping bags, balancing them with the wrapped presents. "I won't stay where I'm not respected." "Good," Dorothy said. Michael's eyes widened. "Dorothy!" "Let her go." Gloria walked to the door with her coat still buttoned, the presents tucked under her arm. She paused in the doorway. "You've poisoned this family." "I've protected my daughter." "If that's poison to you, then yes." The door closed behind Gloria with a definitive thunk. Through the window, Dorothy watched her load the presents into her trunk. The taillights of Gloria's car disappeared down the street, red against the gray sleet. The house felt hollow without the weight of Gloria's presence. Dorothy stood in the living room surrounded by cookies and decorations and the remaining presents under the tree. Everything looked the same. Everything had changed. Michael turned on her. "What the hell was that?" "That was me saying no." "You embarrassed her. In our home. On Christmas Eve. She embarrassed our daughter. She's been embarrassing her for months. Years. And you let her." Michael's jaw tightened. "My mother loves Maddie." "Your mother controls Maddie. There's a difference." "You're being dramatic." Dorothy wanted to scream. She wanted to throw something, break something, make him see what he refused to acknowledge. Instead, she walked to the hallway and knocked softly on Maddie's door. "Can I come in, sweetheart?" The door opened. Maddie stood there with red eyes and tear-streaked cheeks. She'd been crying silently, the way she'd learned to cry when she didn't want anyone to hear. "Grandma said I shouldn't cry because I already had enough birthdays," Maddie whispered. Dorothy knelt down and pulled her daughter close. Maddie smelled like strawberry shampoo and the lavender detergent Dorothy used on her clothes. She felt small and fragile and unbearably precious. "Your grandma was wrong," Dorothy said. "Daddy didn't say anything." "I know. Why doesn't he tell her to stop?" Dorothy didn't have an answer. Not one that a 6-year-old would understand. Not one that Dorothy fully understood herself. "Come on," Dorothy said, standing and taking Maddie's hand. "Let's finish those snowflakes." They spent the next hour cutting paper together. Michael stayed in the garage. The cookies cooled on the kitchen counter. Outside, the sleet turned to snow, covering Cedar Ridge in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and peaceful and nothing like the truth. That night, after Dorothy tucked Maddie into bed, after she kissed her forehead and smoothed her uneven bangs, after she whispered, "I love you," and closed the bedroom door, she stood in the hallway listening. She heard Maddie crying. Soft, muffled sounds that Maddie tried to hide under her pillow. Dorothy sat down on the carpet with her back against the wall and listened to her daughter's quiet grief. She didn't go in. She didn't interrupt. She just bore witness to the pain that Michael and Gloria pretended didn't exist. Something shifted in Dorothy that night, a tectonic plate deep in her foundation moving, realigning, preparing for the earthquake that was coming. She'd spent 6 years of marriage trying to smooth over conflicts, trying to make peace, trying to be the wife Michael needed and the daughter-in-law Gloria demanded. She'd swallowed her pride and her anger and her instincts because keeping the family together seemed more important than her own needs. But Maddie's needs were different. Maddie's needs mattered more than peace, more than marriage, more than anything. Dorothy stood up and walked to the bedroom she shared with Michael. He was already in bed, scrolling through his phone, acting like nothing had happened. "She cried herself to sleep," Dorothy said. Michael didn't look up. "Kids cry because your mother humiliated her. Mom was trying to teach her a lesson." "What lesson? That she matters less than your sister's son?" that her feelings don't count, that the adults in her life won't protect her. Michael finally looked at her. Can you let it go? For one night. No, he sighed, setting his phone on the nightstand. You always look for reasons to hate her. And you always choose her. The silence that followed felt heavy, oppressive. Dorothy changed into her pajamas and got into bed with her back to Michael. They didn't speak. They didn't touch. The space between them felt like a canyon. Dorothy lay awake for hours, listening to Michael's breathing even out into sleep. She stared at the ceiling and thought about the woman she used to be. The woman who'd married Michael 7 years ago, believing love was enough. The woman who'd thought family meant support and protection and sacrifice. That woman had been naive. This woman, the one lying in bed on Christmas Eve listening to the house settle and the snow fall. This woman understood something that naive girl hadn't. Some marriages don't end because people stop loving each other. They end because someone refuses to protect their child. Dorothy started noticing things she'd ignored before. Or maybe she'd always noticed them, but chosen not to see. Either way, the pattern became impossible to deny once she stopped trying to convince herself it wasn't real. Gloria decided holidays without asking. She called Michael in January to announce that Easter would be at her house, that Thanksgiving would start at 2 instead of 4, that Mother's Day brunch would require Dorothy to bring 3 side dishes and arrive early to help set up. No discussion, no input requested, just declarations that Michael accepted with, "Okay, Mom, sounds good." Dorothy documented it. She started a note on her phone titled Family Events and recorded every decision made without her consent. Every time Gloria rearranged their schedule. Every time Michael agreed without checking with Dorothy first. January 15th. Gloria announced she was taking Maddie shopping for new clothes because the child needs proper winter wear. Dorothy had bought Maddie a new coat 3 weeks earlier. Gloria returned with an expensive parka and handed Dorothy the receipt, expecting reimbursement. January 22nd. Gloria showed up unannounced during dinner to drop off leftovers she'd made, since Dorothy probably didn't have time to cook properly. There was a casserole for Michael and his sister's family. Nothing for Dorothy. "You're watching your figure anyway," Gloria said. February 2nd. Gloria corrected Maddie's table manners at a family dinner while ignoring Michael's nephew, who was throwing food across the table. When Dorothy suggested the nephew might also need reminding, Gloria said, "Boys will be boys. Girls need to learn restraint." Dorothy wrote it all down, not because she planned to use it, not yet, but because she needed to see it written out, needed confirmation that she wasn't imagining things or being too sensitive like Michael always claimed. The problem wasn't that Gloria was overbearing. The problem was that Michael enabled her. Every single time. "Let it go," he'd say when Dorothy tried to talk about it. "It's not that big a deal," he'd say when Gloria overstepped. "Can you just try to get along with her?" he'd say, as if getting along meant accepting whatever Gloria wanted. Dorothy stopped trying to explain herself to him. She stopped expecting him to understand. She stopped believing he would ever choose his daughter's well-being over his mother's demands. Instead, she started preparing for what she knew was coming. She began setting aside money from her part-time job at the library. Small amounts at first. $20 here, $50 there. Money Gloria and Michael wouldn't notice missing from their joint account. She opened a savings account at a different bank, one where Michael didn't have access, and deposited her earnings there every 2 weeks. She researched family lawyers in Cedar Ridge. She didn't call any of them yet. She just collected names, read reviews, saved phone numbers in her contacts under innocuous titles. Dr. Patterson was actually Jessica Patterson, attorney at law, specializing in family custody cases. Dentist appointment was a reminder to call Richard Morrison, divorce lawyer with a reputation for being aggressive when children's welfare was at stake. Dorothy became strategic, methodical. She stopped reacting emotionally to Gloria's provocations and Michael's dismissals. She observed instead. She took mental notes. She waited for the inevitable confrontation that would justify what she already knew she had to do. It came in February on a Tuesday afternoon when the sky was the color of old concrete and the temperature hadn't risen above 20 degrees all week. Gloria came over uninvited. She had a key Michael had given her without asking Dorothy first. Dorothy was folding laundry in the living room when she heard the front door open. "Hello." Gloria called out, though she could see Dorothy perfectly well. "In here," Dorothy replied, keeping her voice neutral. Gloria walked into the living room and surveyed the baskets of clean clothes. Laundry day. Must be nice to have so much free time. Dorothy folded a pair of Maddie's pajamas, taking care to line up the seams. "Did you need something?" "I came to discuss Madison's behavior at my house last weekend." Dorothy's hand stilled. "What about it?" "She was disrespectful. She refused to eat what I prepared for dinner and asked for something else. I raised 3 children. I know what disrespect looks like. She's 6 years old. She doesn't like mushrooms." "It's not about the mushrooms. It's about gratitude, about learning to accept what's given without complaint." Dorothy set down the pajamas and looked at Gloria directly. "You don't get to discipline my daughter." Gloria's expression turned sharp. "Someone needs to. You're too permissive with her, too soft. If Michael had married someone stronger, we wouldn't have these problems." The words landed like a punch, but Dorothy didn't flinch. She'd been preparing for this, preparing for the moment when Gloria finally said out loud what she'd been implying for years. "If Michael were stronger," Dorothy said calmly, "I wouldn't be having this conversation alone." Gloria's eyes narrowed. "Careful." "Or what?" "You forget who you're speaking to." "No." Dorothy stood up, leaving the laundry unfolded on the couch. "I remember exactly who I'm speaking to. The woman who takes my daughter's Christmas presents. The woman who tells her she's too sensitive. The woman who thinks loving a child means controlling them." Gloria's face flushed red. "How dare you?" "I dare because I'm her mother. That's a role you seem to have forgotten isn't yours. Michael will hear about this." "Good. Tell him. Tell him everything I said. Tell him I stood up to you. Tell him I'm not backing down anymore." Gloria grabbed her purse from where she'd set it on the end table. "He will always choose me." That was the truth Gloria believed. The truth she'd built her entire relationship with Michael around. The unspoken threat that had controlled Dorothy's behavior for years. And Dorothy finally accepted it. Not with despair. With clarity. "I know," Dorothy said. Gloria left without another word. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the pictures on the wall. Dorothy stood in the middle of the living room surrounded by half-folded laundry and felt something like relief. She'd stopped pretending. Michael came home from work at 6:30. Dorothy had dinner ready, spaghetti and meatballs, his favorite. She served it calmly, setting his plate in front of him without fanfare. "How was your day?" he asked. "Your mother came by." His fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Oh, she said you'd always choose her." Michael set his fork down carefully. He didn't ask what the context was. Didn't ask what led to that statement. He knew. "She's my mother, Dorothy. And Maddie is your daughter. Why do you always make it a competition?" "I don't." "She does. She walks in here and criticizes how I parent. She takes Maddie's gifts. She tells me I'm too weak for you, and you let her." Michael rubbed his face with both hands. "Can we not do this right now?" "When would be a better time?" "When Maddie's a teenager and thinks it's normal for women to accept being treated like they don't matter. When she's an adult in therapy, trying to understand why her father never protected her." "That's not fair." "What's not fair is asking me to choose between protecting my daughter and keeping your mother happy. That's an impossible choice, but apparently for you it's easy." Michael stood up from the table. You're asking me to cut my mother out of my life. I'm asking you to set boundaries, to tell her no when she's hurting Maddie, to prioritize your child over your mother's ego. I can't do that. Dorothy looked at her husband, really looked at him and saw who he was. Not who she'd hoped he'd become. Not who she'd believed he could be with enough love and patience and support. Just who he actually was. A man who would sacrifice his daughter's emotional well-being to avoid conflict with his mother. Then I'm asking you to choose, Dorothy said quietly. Michael stared at her. Choose. Maddie or Gloria. Our family or your mother's control. Choose. The silence stretched between them. The spaghetti grew cold. The kitchen clock ticked. Maddie was at a play date at a friend's house, blissfully unaware that her parents' marriage was ending in real time over uneaten dinner. Michael didn't answer. Dorothy nodded slowly. That's the answer. Dorothy, you just chose. By not choosing, that tells me everything I need to know. She walked out of the kitchen and into the bedroom. She didn't slam the door. She didn't cry. She sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts until she found Dr. Patterson. She'd call tomorrow, first thing in the morning. She'd set up a consultation. She'd start the process. But tonight, she sat in the quiet of her bedroom and mourned the marriage she'd thought she had. Not the marriage she'd actually lived in. She'd stopped grieving that months ago. She mourned the illusion, the hope, the belief that love could overcome dysfunction if she just tried hard enough. That woman was gone now. The one who believed in trying harder, in being patient, in waiting for Michael to wake up and see what he was doing to their family. This woman, the one sitting on the bed with her phone in her hand and divorce lawyer numbers saved in her contacts. She understood what that naive version of herself hadn't. Some people choose comfort over courage every single time, and you couldn't build a family on comfort if it meant sacrificing your child's sense of safety. Michael slept on the couch that night. Dorothy locked the bedroom door. Not to keep him out, he wouldn't have tried to come in anyway, but to feel like she had control over something, anything, in a life that had stopped feeling like hers years ago. She lay awake, listening to the house settle. The furnace kicked on. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car drove past with music playing too loud, bass thumping into the winter night. Dorothy thought about Maddie, about the little girl who hummed when she was nervous, who cut her own bangs because she wanted to be independent, who cried quietly so no one would hear. Maddie deserved better than this. Better than a grandmother who used love as a weapon and a father who couldn't stand up for her. She deserved a mother who would. Dorothy fell asleep sometime after midnight with her phone clutched in her hand and a plan forming in her mind. Tomorrow, she would call the lawyer. Tomorrow, she would start the exit strategy she'd been unconsciously planning for months. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, she let herself grieve. Dorothy called Jessica Patterson at 9 o'clock the next morning, after dropping Maddie at school and before Michael came home from his night shift at the factory. The lawyer's voice was professional, measured, kind without being soft. "Tell me what's happening," Jessica said. Dorothy told her. All of it. The Christmas presents, the uninvited visits, the constant criticism, Michael's refusal to set boundaries, Gloria's threat that Michael would always choose her, the way Maddie had started humming nervously and crying silently. Jessica listened without interrupting. When Dorothy finished, she heard the lawyer exhale, slowly. "You need to document everything," Jessica said. "Every interaction with your mother-in-law. Every time your husband fails to intervene. Every change you notice in your daughter's behavior. Dates, times, what was said, who witnessed it." "I've already started." "Good. That puts you ahead. How are your finances?" "We have a joint account. I've been setting aside money for my part-time job. Small amounts. Open a separate account if you haven't already. Get copies of all your financial documents, bank statements, tax returns, mortgage papers, credit card bills. Do you have somewhere safe to keep them?" My desk at work. At the library. Perfect. You'll need those for asset division. Asset division. The clinical term made it real in a way Dorothy hadn't fully processed. She was going to divorce Michael. This wasn't a thought exercise anymore. This was actually happening. What about custody? Dorothy asked. Ohio is a shared parenting state, but judges consider what's in the best interest of the child. If you can demonstrate that your husband's mother is negatively impacting your daughter's emotional well-being, and that your husband refuses to protect her from that harm, it strengthens your case for primary custody. How do I demonstrate it? Keep documenting. If possible, get your daughter into therapy. A child therapist can provide professional assessment of how the family dynamics are affecting her. That carries weight in court. Dorothy scheduled a follow-up appointment for the following week. She hung up feeling something she hadn't felt in months. Not hope, she was too practical for that, but purpose, direction, a sense that she was finally moving forward instead of just surviving. She spent that afternoon calling child therapists. The first 3 weren't taking new patients. The fourth, a woman named Dr. Helenu, had an opening the following Tuesday. What are your concerns for your daughter? Doctor, you asked during the phone intake. Her grandmother is emotionally manipulative, and her father doesn't intervene. She started showing signs of anxiety, nervous habits, trying to make herself invisible. How old is she? 6. Bring her in. We'll do an initial assessment and go from there. Dorothy hung up and added the appointment to her phone calendar. She titled it dentist in case Michael looked. She'd gotten good at hiding things in plain sight, at building an escape plan while still making dinner and doing laundry and pretending everything was normal. That night, Michael came home and acted like their fight the previous evening hadn't happened. He kissed Maddie's head, asked about her day, helped her with a puzzle on the living room floor. He was good at pretending. They both were. Dorothy watched them together and felt a pang of something like sadness. Not for herself, for Maddie, because her daughter loved her father, and this was going to hurt her, and there was no way to prevent that pain. Dorothy could only try to make sure the pain was temporary, that Maddie would heal, that she'd grow up knowing she mattered more than keeping peace with toxic people. Over the next 2 weeks, Dorothy executed her plan with the precision of a military operation. She photographed every important document, mortgage papers, car titles, insurance policies, bank statements. She stored them in a cloud folder Michael didn't have access to. She transferred $500 from their joint account into her separate savings, an amount small enough that Michael wouldn't notice immediately. She took Maddie to see Dr. Yu. The therapist was in her early 40s with gentle eyes and a calm presence that put Maddie at ease within minutes. She had Maddie draw pictures and play with puppets while she asked careful questions. Do you like visiting Grandma's house? Maddie shrugged. Sometimes. What's your favorite part? She has cookies. What's your least favorite part? Maddie drew a picture of a girl with tears. When she says, I'm too loud or too messy or too much. Doctor, you looked at Dorothy over Maddie's head. That look said everything. After the session, Dr. Yu walked Dorothy to her car while Maddie waited inside the office with the receptionist. Your daughter is showing signs of emotional stress, Dr. Yu said. She's hypervigilant. She monitors adult reactions constantly. She's learned to make herself smaller to avoid criticism. From her grandmother? Likely, but also from witnessing her father fail to protect her. Children internalize these patterns. They learn what treatment to accept as normal. What do I do? Create safety, consistent boundaries. Let her know it's okay to have needs and feelings, and remove or limit her exposure to the source of stress if possible. Dorothy nodded. I'm working on that. She scheduled weekly therapy sessions for Maddie and added them to her calendar under music lessons. Michael never checked her calendar anyway. 3 weeks after Dorothy's confrontation with Gloria, she met with Jessica Patterson in person. The lawyer's office was in a converted house on the edge of Cedar Ridges, small downtown. It smelled like coffee and lemon furniture polish. Jessica spread Dorothy's documents across her desk and reviewed them with the focus of a surgeon examining X-rays. When she finished, she looked up with an expression Dorothy couldn't quite read. "You have a strong case," Jessica said. "Documented pattern of behavior. Professional assessment from a child therapist. Financial documentation showing you're capable of supporting yourself. Character evidence from your employer at the library. This is solid. What's the next step?" "I file the petition for divorce. I request temporary orders for custody and child support. We serve your husband with papers. Then we negotiate. And if he doesn't negotiate, then we go to court. But most cases settle before trial, especially when one party realizes the other has done their homework." Dorothy signed the retainer agreement. Jessica explained the timeline. 6 months minimum in Ohio, longer if Michael contested custody. Dorothy listened and took notes and felt strangely calm. She'd made the decision. Now she just had to follow through. She told Michael on a Saturday morning in early March. Maddie was at a birthday party, giving them 2 hours alone. Dorothy had packed a bag the night before and hidden it in her car trunk. Not because she thought Michael would be violent. He'd never been physically aggressive. But because she wanted the option to leave immediately if the conversation went badly. Michael was in the garage again, actually working on the car this time. Dorothy walked out there carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one. "We need to talk," she said. He looked wary. "About what?" "I want a divorce." The wrench in his hand clattered to the concrete floor. "What?" "I'm filing for divorce. I've already retained a lawyer. The papers will be served next week." Michael stared at her like she'd started speaking another language. "You're serious?" "Completely. Because of my mother." "Because you choose your mother over our daughter. Every time. And I can't watch that anymore." "Dorothy, come on. You're overreacting." She'd expected him to say that. She didn't react. Just sipped her coffee and waited. "I'm not overreacting. I'm finally reacting correctly. We can fix this. We can go to counseling." "I don't want to fix this. I want out." Michael's face cycled through emotions. Shock, anger, confusion, something that might have been grief. "You can't just give up." "I'm not giving up. I'm choosing our daughter. That's what you should have been doing all along." "I do choose her." "No. You choose whoever makes the least noise. Whoever demands the least from you. And that's never been Maddie." Michael slumped against the workbench. "What about custody?" "I'm asking for primary custody with visitation for you. Jessica says we can work out a schedule." "Your lawyer. You've already got a lawyer." "Yes. How long have you been planning this?" Dorothy thought about the note on her phone, the separate bank account, the documents stored in the cloud, the therapy appointments, the careful, methodical preparation that had consumed the last 2 months of her life. "Long enough," she said. She left him in the garage and went back inside. She called Jessica and told her to proceed with filing. Then she picked Maddie up from the birthday party and took her to get ice cream, even though it was barely 50 degrees outside. They sat in the car with the heater running, eating chocolate cones. "Mom," Maddie said. "Yeah, honey." "Are you and Daddy fighting?" Dorothy had prepared for this question. She'd practiced the answer with Dr. Yu. "Dad and I are having some disagreements, but it's not your fault, and we both still love you very much." "Is it because of Grandma?" Children saw more than adults gave them credit for. Dorothy had learned that over the past weeks, watching Maddie navigate the therapy sessions, speaking truths Dorothy hadn't fully articulated herself. "Partly," Dorothy said, "but mostly it's because Dad and I need to figure out some things. And while we figure it out, you're going to keep going to Dr. Yu and keep going to school and keep being exactly who you are." Maddie licked her ice cream. "Okay, You can ask me questions whenever you want. About anything. Will we still live in our house? For now. We'll see what happens. Maddie nodded and went back to her ice cream. Dorothy watched her daughter and felt the decision settle into her bones. This was right. Hard but right. Painful but necessary. Some things were worth breaking everything else to protect. The papers were served on Tuesday. Michael called Dorothy 17 times that afternoon. She didn't answer. She let them all go to voicemail. Gloria called the next day. Dorothy blocked her number immediately. Michael's sister called after that, crying, begging Dorothy to reconsider. "You're tearing the family apart," she sobbed. Dorothy thought about Maddie, crying herself to sleep on Christmas Eve, about the hunched shoulders and nervous humming, about the little girl who'd learned to make herself invisible to avoid criticism. The family was already torn, Dorothy said. I'm just acknowledging it. She hung up and blocked that number too. The next 3 months were a blur of paperwork and lawyer meetings and mediations. Michael contested custody at first, claiming Dorothy was alienating Maddie from his family. Jessica submitted Dr. Yu's assessment. She submitted Dorothy's documentation. She submitted testimony from Maddie's teacher describing the change in the child's demeanor. More withdrawn, more anxious, less engaged. Michael's lawyer argued that Dorothy was exaggerating, that family disagreements were normal, that grandparents had rights. Jessica argued that protecting a child from emotional harm took precedence over family unity, that Michael had repeatedly failed to establish boundaries, that the pattern was documented and consistent. The judge reviewed everything. A custody evaluator interviewed both parents and Maddie. The evaluator's report was damning. She noted Maddie's visible stress when discussing visits to Michael's house, especially when Gloria was present. She noted Michael's inability to identify specific instances of protecting Maddie from his mother's criticism. She noted Dorothy's consistent prioritization of Maddie's emotional needs. In June, the judge issued temporary orders. Primary custody to Dorothy. Visitation for Michael every other weekend and 1 weeknight. No unsupervised visitation with a paternal grandmother. Gloria called from a number Dorothy hadn't blocked yet. Dorothy answered by accident. "You've poisoned him against me," Gloria spat. "You've destroyed everything. I've protected my daughter. If that destroys your relationship with your son, that says more about your relationship than it does about me. He'll never forgive you for this. Maybe not. But Maddie will thank me someday. That's enough." Dorothy hung up and blocked the new number. Michael barely spoke to her during custody exchanges. He'd pull up to the curb, and Maddie would run out to his car. He'd avoid eye contact with Dorothy, just nod curtly and drive away. The first few exchanges, Maddie came back quiet and withdrawn. Dorothy would give her space, let her decompress. Eventually, Maddie would talk about her weekend, about how Grandma wasn't there, about how Daddy was sad, about how she missed both of them but also felt better. "I don't have to be scared of saying something wrong," Maddie told Dr. Yu during one session. Dr. Yu looked at Dorothy with an expression of validation Dorothy hadn't realized she'd needed. By the time the final divorce decree came through in September, Dorothy had moved into a small rental house on the other side of Cedar Ridge. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a tiny backyard, old appliances that worked but weren't pretty. The house was hers, though. No mortgage with Michael's name on it. No memories of Gloria's disapproval. No ghosts of arguments past. Maddie helped her decorate. They picked out curtains together, bright yellow for the living room, purple with stars for Maddie's bedroom. They hung pictures Maddie had drawn in therapy, pictures of houses and flowers and girls with big smiles. Dorothy enrolled Maddie in a new school district. Smaller classes, a teacher who'd come highly recommended, a fresh start where nobody knew their history or had opinions about the divorce. Michael showed up on move-in day while Dorothy was unpacking boxes in the kitchen. He stood in the doorway looking uncertain. "Can I come in?" he asked. It's not your house. I know. I wanted to see where Maddie would be living. Dorothy stepped aside and let him walk through. He looked at the yellow curtains and the pictures on the walls and Maddie's purple bedroom with its second-hand dresser and yard sale bookshelf. It's small, he said. It's enough. I never wanted this. Dorothy set down the box she was holding. I know. You wanted me to keep accepting whatever your mother dished out. You wanted me to teach our daughter that her feelings don't matter as much as keeping peace. But I couldn't do that anymore. Mom still doesn't understand why she can't see Maddie. Then you explain it to her. Tell her that her behavior has consequences, that she doesn't get access to her granddaughter if she's going to hurt her. She says she never hurt anyone. Then she's lying, or she genuinely doesn't understand the damage she's done. Either way, that's not my problem to fix. Michael looked at his shoes. I still think we could have worked it out. No, you think I should have tolerated it indefinitely. That's different. He left without saying goodbye to Maddie. Dorothy watched his car drive away and felt nothing. No anger, no regret, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing she'd done the right thing even when it cost her everything else. A year passed. Maddie's 7th birthday came and went with a small party at their rental house. Just 3 friends from her new school, and cupcakes Dorothy had made from a box mix. Maddie blew out her candles and made a wish she wouldn't tell anyone. And Dorothy hoped that wish involved happiness and safety and the knowledge that she was loved. Michael still defended Gloria when Maddie came back from visits, talking about tense phone calls she overheard. Gloria still believed she'd done nothing wrong. She'd started sending letters to Dorothy's house. Letters Dorothy threw away unopened. Dorothy stopped caring what Gloria thought. Stopped caring what Michael's family said about her. Stopped caring what people in Cedar Ridge thought about the divorced woman who'd broken up her family over disagreements that looked small from the outside. The people who mattered knew the truth. Dr. Yu knew. Maddie's teacher knew. Jessica Patterson knew. And Maddie, slowly but surely, was learning. On Christmas morning, a year and 3 months after Gloria had taken those presents, Dorothy and Maddie woke up in their rental house to a tree decorated exactly how they wanted it. Multicolored lights, homemade ornaments, tinsel everywhere because Maddie thought it was pretty and nobody was there to tell them it looked cheap. Maddie opened her presents without fear. She laughed without checking to see if anyone disapproved. She left wrapping paper scattered across the floor and ate 2 chocolate Santas before breakfast. And Dorothy didn't say a word because joy mattered more than rules. They spent the afternoon in pajamas, watching movies, and eating popcorn for dinner. Michael picked Maddie up the next morning for his holiday visitation. Gloria wasn't there when he arrived. She'd finally learned the court orders were serious. Dorothy stood in the doorway of their small, safe house and watched Maddie climb into her father's car. She felt the familiar pang of worry, the instinctive desire to protect her daughter from everything painful in the world. But she also felt something else. Peace. She'd made the hardest choice a mother could make. She'd blown up her marriage, alienated her in-laws, disrupted her daughter's life, and moved into a tiny rental house where the heat sometimes didn't work and the kitchen faucet dripped no matter how many times she tightened it. And she'd do it all again. Because Maddie laughed now. Really laughed. She didn't hum nervously or cry silently or make herself small. She took up space. She had opinions. She said no when she didn't want something, and Dorothy praised her for it. Some marriages don't end because people stop loving each other. Dorothy had loved Michael once, deeply and truly. Maybe part of her still did, buried under the resentment and disappointment. But she loved her daughter more, fiercely, protectively, unconditionally. And that love had required Dorothy to become someone stronger, someone harder, someone willing to walk away from everything comfortable and familiar because comfort wasn't worth the cost of Maddie's well-being. Dorothy closed the door and walked back to the Christmas mess in her living room. She picked up discarded wrapping paper and organized presents while thinking about the woman she'd been 2 years ago. The woman who'd stood at her kitchen window on Christmas Eve making cookies for a mother-in-law who'd never appreciate them. Married to a man who'd never stand up for his daughter. That woman would barely recognize who Dorothy had become. The single mother in a rental house with a part-time library job and a second-hand everything. The woman who'd learned to stop apologizing for protecting her child. The woman who discovered that sometimes the right choice looked like failure from the outside but felt like victory on the inside. Dorothy would never regret choosing her daughter. Not when she lost friends who thought she was being dramatic. Not when Michael's family spread rumors about her. Not when the money was tight and the house was small and everything felt harder than it should. Because every time Maddie smiled without fear, every time she spoke without hesitation, every time she took up space without apologizing, that was Dorothy's vindication. She'd saved her daughter from learning to accept emotional cruelty as love. She taught her that mothers protect their children, even when it costs everything. And someday, when Maddie was older, she'd understand. She'd recognize the gift Dorothy had given her. The fierce, unconditional protection. The refusal to compromise on what mattered most. That understanding wouldn't come for years. But Dorothy could wait. She had nothing but time now. In this small rental house that felt more like home than anywhere she'd lived with Michael. Time to watch her daughter heal. Time to rebuild a life based on truth instead of performance. Time to show Maddie what a woman who knows her worth looks like. Dorothy finished cleaning up the Christmas mess and made herself coffee. Strong and black, the way she liked it. Not the way Gloria insisted it should be made. Not the way Michael preferred to drink it. Her way. Because this was her life now. Her choices. Her rules. Her small, hard-won freedom that had cost her everything, but given her daughter the chance to grow up knowing she mattered more than someone else's ego. That was a trade Dorothy would make every single time. She sat on her second-hand couch with her coffee and looked at the yellow curtains Maddie had helped pick out, the lopsided Christmas tree with too much tinsel, the scattered toys and art supplies that Gloria would have criticized as messy. It was messy. It was imperfect. It was exactly enough. And Dorothy had never been more at peace.